And so we'll go around and we'll have about 25 minutes to go through updates. So if we keep it nice and short and tight, that'd be great. We have several of our presenters already and queued up. So thank you for joining us. You can just pass when it comes to your turn because we'll get plenty of more information from you in a moment. So on my screen, why don't we go with Rose first? You want to give us an update?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Joining from home today. Excited to be here and hear the panel. And I think starting off 2025, a big focus has been all of the upcoming workshops that we have. There's a ton going on. Some of them are already full, but there are a lot that still have room. And we just had an e-newsletter with all of the available workshops that still have room go out this morning. And that went out to everyone who's subscribed to our e-newsletter. And then also I forwarded it to the listserv. So you might have gotten it twice, but I think you definitely got it. Yeah, I'd say that's the main focus right now.
That's exciting. Thank you, Rose. Next I have Adriana. Do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Kim. Good morning, good to see everyone. A couple announcements from the RCD side. With multiple partners, the RCDs were hard at work submitting a forest health grant proposal that went in earlier this week. And we are, I think, Sonoma RCD and Conservation Works, who are most involved in it, are hopefully sleeping right now and taking rest because that was a huge effort. We would love to fill you in, give you a little backstory, look under the hood of that grant next month if we can make some time on the agenda for it. But for now, I just wanted to say it's out, and we hope that you all will send up a prayer for us because it should be a good thing if we get it. Another thing I wanted to share. Our beloved Dee Swanheiser has been missing from our meetings recently, and that's because she has been taking care of her husband, who recently passed away. And I just wanted to let everyone know that that's what's happening in Dee's life. And folks who went to the winter party signed cards for Dee, and she got them in the mail, and she just wants to thank everyone for sending them. They really meant a lot to her. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank Rose Antaki, who has been helping me and Kim with coordinating this wonderful group for the last year. And since she joined as a permanent staff of Goldridge RCD after her AmeriCorps fellowship, she is coming on. I just wanted to say at the beginning of this year, she's officially the co-coordinator for the Forest Working Group. So you guys already probably know that she's been doing so much to help keep everyone together and communicate about the work we're doing. So, but I just wanted to make kind of an official announcement that that is her capacity here. So thanks to Rose for all your work, and really, really so glad to have you officially on board. And with that, I'll pass it on. Oh, I don't have Kim's audio. Does anyone else?
I just muted myself. So, all right, here we go. That's probably what everybody wants to do is mute Kim. So here's your opportunity. So Anne, could you go next, please? Just a name and what organization you're representing today.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Krelock. I'm the Planning and Program Manager at the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority.
Thank you for joining us. And how about Patty, why don't you go next here in the room?
Hi, Patty Aaron with Sonoma RCD. Well, like Adriana said, we worked hard on getting that forest health grant application in, and we're hopeful we'll get it. We have 3 workshops coming up. Starting next Tuesday is an 8-week forest stewardship workshop through the UC extension, and it's fantastic. I've taken it and it's just wonderful for landowners to work through doing a forest management plan. We have a post-fire considerations workshop coming up on March 1st. And a grazing and range management workshop on March 15th. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Patty. And next on our screen is Kelly and Harlan. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Harlan Tranmer. I'm a registered professional forester for Environmental Resource Solutions.
And I'm Kelly Mathia, and I help run the business for Environmental Resource Solutions.
Fantastic, thank you. And they are the proud owners of a new contract to establish the North Side Russian River Shaded Fuel Break Project, which started work this week. So we're very excited about that. Thank you, Harlan and Kelly, for all your work on that. Next, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, Joe Nordlinger. I'm the CEO of Napa Firewise. We're sort of the kind of the primary fire safe council, organizer of fire safe councils, and we drive a lot of the wildfire resilience strategy over here in Napa County. Nice to meet everybody. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for joining us. Chris, do you want to give an update?
Yeah, hi everyone, Chris Gribble with Supervisor James Gore's office. One quick thing while I have everybody here, I think most folks may have gotten an invite, but really wanted to stress the importance and also the excitement around the North Coast Resource Partnerships Climate Summit that's coming up on January 29th and 30th. Graciously sponsored and hosted by the Federated Indians of Grayton Rancheria at Grayton Resort. And if folks aren't familiar with the North Coast Resource Partnership, it's a partnership of the 7 northern counties, 32 tribal councils, and many of the state agencies, CAL FIRE, DWR, others that we work with. And there will be community partners, nonprofits as well. And everyone here is obviously invited. And if you go to the North Coast Resource Partnership website, you can see the registration link. I'm stressing it now because I want to make sure anybody who wants to come is registered because it is filling up. And it's free and catered by the tribe. So just encourage everyone to come. It's 2 days, but come to whatever portion you can. There'll be some good folks in the room and lots of local and national leaders, Congressman Huffman, others, especially right after inauguration, talking about climate and natural resources is going to be a big deal. So hope everybody can make it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. And how about Roberta McIntyre?
Hi, everybody. Good to see y'all. Mostly familiar faces. I'm Roberta McIntyre with Fire Safe Sonoma. I'm the president and CEO, and Fire Safe Sonoma is Sonoma County's county-wide Fire Safe Council. We're an independent nonprofit working in the space for over 26 years now.
Thanks, Roberta. Thanks for joining us today. Caitlin Cornwall.
She just put a note in chat that she had to step away for a second.
Oh, thank you. Okay, let's go to Kathleen in the room.
Kathleen Kraft, I'm with the Ocean Song and I work with Land Path, mostly on grassland studies.
Thank you, Kathleen. Glad to see you. And let's go with Eric Shoes on the screen.
All right, hello. How's everyone doing? It's nice to see a lot of your faces in person at the end of last year. Let's see. So lately I've been working with Sonoma Ecology Center to prep for training. So we have a couple with the junior college that we're doing the fire resilient landscaping course, which we're very excited about. Just getting workforce development kind of done on the ground. And then with my other hat, I'm working on starting a business doing ecologically informed land stewardship and moving in towards the house with home hardening and defensible space, all within the lens of ecology. So yeah, it's been busy and it's nice to get in the room, and looking forward to hearing these presentations today from Ann and Joe.
All right, thanks, Eric. How about Jason Mills, please?
Hey everybody, great to see ya. Sorry I haven't been as present lately. We got hit with a bunch of storm work with those floods and doing erosion control, and then we jumped in doing some defensible space, home hardening for Fire Safe Sonoma. And now we are jumping into another pretty big fuel reduction project, 20-30 acres here in Mark West. That'll keep us busy through spring, but on the hunt for our next great project this summer. So super excited to hear the speakers. And I probably should have started with Jason Mills, founder, contractor, and ecologist with Ecological Solutions. So excited for the presentations today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for joining us from the field. We appreciate that. We're there in spirit. How about Sloan? Could you give an update, please?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. So, an update from NRCS. We have an upcoming deadline for our program. So, our climate smart practices on January 31st. So, if you or you know anyone interested, please email me as soon as possible so we can get you in before that deadline. And I'll drop my email into the chat. And not to worry if the timing's not right now, we have another upcoming deadline in April.
All right, thank you, Sloan. Thanks for joining us today. And in the house, we have Sasha Samaratno.
Hello. I know a bunch of you from when I was with UC Cooperative Extension. I am currently the Wildfire and Climate Resiliency Chief at PD&E as of last year, and board member of Roberta's at Fire Safe Sonoma. So excited to see you all again in a new role.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. All right, Lauren Clausen, please.
Hi, everybody. This is actually my first forest working group that I've been to, even after I've been at the Ecology Center, for Sonoma Ecology Center for a little over 2 years, but always get pulled in different directions. I manage our restoration program, so I'm working closely with Eric and Caitlin, as well as securing funding and overseeing our crew doing implementation in the field. So right now we are doing a ton of invasive species management, a lot of broom pulling, which is, you know, as you guys know, it's a feat to accomplish, but very excited to be here and hear from the speakers. Thanks.
That sounds good. Well, I'm glad you're able to join us today. And Corey, you are next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corey O'Gorman. I am partnered with Eric on Ecos Land Services, the business that he was speaking about. So we've been working a lot on getting that started. And I did my master's at Pepperwood, looking at Black Oak stewardship with Clint McKay and the Native Advisory Council, and then worked with LandPass, where I met Eric. And I was happy to meet everybody at La Rosa at the dinner and looking forward to being a part of the group moving forward. Thanks.
See, Lauren, that's the advantage of being associated with this group. At the end of the year, we get to celebrate at La Rosa. So just so you know.
I will
right,
be there
Corey.
this next year.
Here. And next we have Margot Merck.
Unmute. Hi. Yeah, I'm this first time attending one of these. Happen to be available, and we're working with Sloan out in the Chalk Hill area where the Kincaid fire was, and looking forward to continuing to learn as much as we can.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm glad you're able to join us today. Feliz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. I'm Paola. I'm with ERG. I'm part of the consultant team working with the County of Sonoma to develop a wildfire resiliency program. And I'm really looking forward to learning more during the panel and sharing with our team.
Thanks for joining us, Paola. Tori Norville.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Norville. I'm with UC Cooperative Extensions. I'm the Fire Science Advisor. I also do a lot in forestry as well. I'm taking notes, so that's why my camera's off. But I've been working on lots of workshops for Sonoma County coming up this basically spring. So starting in February, there's going to be a lot of workshops, or actually January. A lot of workshops coming out from UC. And Rose sent a bunch of those out, so I won't go into them. Thanks.
I promised Chris from Occidental to give a heads up on the workshop, the pile burning workshop on February 14th. It's going to be hosted on his land and sponsored by the UCA Cooperative Extension. So that should be a great event. So that's also on the list. So definitely pay attention to the event and sign up when you can. Next on my screen is Ari DeMarco.
Hi, I'm Ari DeMarco. I'm with Sonoma RCD. I work with Patty, and she's got all the updates for us covered, I think. I am going to be, well, Patty and I are both going to be at the North Coast Resource Partnership meeting coming up, so hope to see you guys there. I'll be at the Intercoast Collaborative table if anybody wants to stop and say hi.
Great, thanks for joining us. Joseph Geary.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, there you are.
Hi, my name's Joe Geary, and I'm a committee member of the recently formed Central Sonoma Coast Firewise community.
Great.
And I have gone to a number of your presentations before and attended a number of your workshops, and I'm here to just check to see what you guys are doing today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
All right. Next on my screen is Sophia Porter.
Hi, folks. My name is Sophia. Some of you I've met and know very well. I work for the UC Cooperative Extension as well, like Tori does. In my current position, I am I think what it's called, Forestry Education Specialist. So I help out with as a support person for our workshop series. I think Patty had mentioned that just a little bit ago, but we are starting one up this coming Tuesday, and then I just got off a planning meeting for another one that we are going to be trying to start up in April and focusing Tuolumne counties. But I do that, and then we have like a I'll say a sister program with post-fire resilience. Currently we have something, it's online, so if any of you are interested in it, it's going to be focusing on Butte County, and that's going to be starting up at the beginning of February as well. So those are the things I'm involved with, and kind of one-off things, and sometimes, you know, partnering with Tori with some of her stuff as well. So, okay.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. All right, and next on my screen is Carleone Safford.
Hi, nice to see everybody. I'm Carleone with the County of Sonoma, where I do wildfire resilience grants that are focused on both home hardening, defensible space, and large-scale fuels management across Sonoma County.
All right, thanks, Carleone. Glad you joined us. Robert Aguero.
Good morning, everyone. Robert Aguero, also with Permit Sonoma. I'm an environmental specialist and professional forester here, and currently our interim grants program manager for our FEMA wildfire grants program.
All right, thanks, Robert, for joining us. And then there's it looks like a cell phone, a Samsung that's doesn't have a name associated with it, unless we're actually talking to Mr. Samsung. All right, if that person wants to introduce themselves, you're welcome to. All right, so that's great. Thanks, folks, for, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm Samsung. I'm Priscilla Lane.
Hi,
I'm
Priscilla.
a forest owner out here in Sebastopol.
Hello,
Okay, glad
Priscilla.
you're able to join us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and then finally, I'll give a quick report out. I am Kim Batchelder from Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. I'm also the Vegetation Management Coordinator for the county on using the PG&E settlement funds from 2021. We are really excited about the new project on the north side, Russian River Shaded Fuel Break project that got a grant for $1.8 million to establish a 13-mile shaded fuel break above Gernwood, Guerneville, Rio Neto, and Mount Jack, or actually Hacienda. So that's started work this week. We're taking advantage of the dry weather and then a little bit of work done before the nesting season starts on February 1st. So it's very exciting to have that going. The other things that we've been working on is a whole series of different workshops. Last Saturday, we hosted our first forest management planning workshop for conservation easement landowners. That was very successful. We had about 3 hours in classroom session here at Ag and Open Space, and then went up to Saddle Mountain to actually see some forests and see some challenges that Monica Del Martini was able to share her experience on the planning and implementation of fuel breaks on that property. So all these training events really are hosted by such a great slew of people that are on this call, and really give landowners an excellent opportunity to find out what's available in their area, what they can do with their own land. So that is essentially what the Forest Conservation Working Group is all about, is trying to provide good resources to landowners to be able to do this work. So without further ado, I think this is a great time to launch our new panel, or our discussion panel for fuel and wildfire prevention and resilience programs in the North Bay. I'm really excited to have Joe Norlinger, Ann Krelock, and Roberta McIntyre, and at 12 o'clock, Marshall Tuberville will be joining us. So with that, I'd like to introduce Joe Norlinger, who, let me get your bio here. Joe has been a community leader in organizational capacity building, capacity planning related to wildland fire resilience. His experience includes 10 years in leadership roles with Napa and Sonoma County's fire safety communities, including 7 years as a volunteer firefighter with the Sonoma, or the Dry Creek Lacoya Station 16. 7 years as the chairman of the Mount Veeder Fire Safe Council, and 6 years as the interim chair and then vice chair of grants for Napa Firewise. Joe is currently the CEO of Napa Firewise, and Joe participated in successful efforts to reorganize and transform the mission of Napa Firewise to substantially expand the range of services it provides, which transformed its posture, becoming the leading agency for fire mitigation in Napa County. So Joe, why don't you give us a quick introduction of yourself and the program that you are managing? And maybe a follow-up question is, how does that organizational structure help you to be able to carry out your mission?
Yeah, great. And thanks, Kim. I don't know if I knew you were going to read that all. That's kind of a mouthful, and you probably should shoot me for even sending it across to you that way. But I appreciate you taking the time to share some of that background. So, I mean, a little bit more about my experience beyond sort of what you relayed there from the bio. I do not necessarily come from a firefighting background or a forest management background or scientist, ecologist background. My background is much more private sector focused, and I, have 25 years of experience building large scalable sort of professional services and services provision companies. And so that's kind of the lens that I look at the challenge through when it comes to dealing with wildfire resilience. I got into the space because I'm a Napa resident, happened to buy a piece of property that is a forested land, has some wildfire risk associated with it, and sort of wound up digging into the challenge while I was running my company. And as I mentioned before, I kind of look at it from the standpoint of like, how do you build scalable solutions? Where do you find the money? How do you make sure that the money is sustained? How do you basically address the challenges and build solutions that can be replicated and have some means of sort of economies of scale and things like that? How do you think about customers and customer experience, et cetera? So that's kind of the way that I've approached the issue here in Napa. I happen to be in a position where I could influence the transformation of Napa Firewise at this kind of inflection point. With the 2017 fires, the organization was like on the verge of kind of disbanding because a bunch of people, the leadership had lost their homes, and I was able to sort of step in and kind of reorganize the way I thought the 501c3 should be structured. I'll just take a minute to kind of talk briefly about that. In general, I have this view about trying to sort of create efficiency through some level of centralization. So we're a 501c3. We are sort of the clearinghouse for all the fire safe councils in Napa. We're the mothership, and all the fire safe councils are essentially associations of people. They're not their own corpus entities. And we provide sort of this shared services hub for all the grant writing, all the project development, all the geospatial analysis, renting the porta potties, hiring the crews, doing the vendor management, vendor selection, working with the county, all the grant, everything. So we try to be sort of the core services framework that then allows the fire safe councils to focus on what we feel is their highest and best value, which is the community outreach, the connective tissue to local landowners, the feedback loops. That's how we sort of get our information about project priorities. Within those fire safe councils, we have 22 of them. There's another 5 or so that are on the horizon that we'll establish here in the next probably year and a half. And so that's a little bit about how we're organized, and hopefully that's helpful context as it relates to what we're working on over here in Napa.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that download. We will now move on to Ann Krelock, and we're going to come back to Joe. We're going to try to mix it up and allow each of our presenters to give a description of who they are and what they do within their organization. And then we'll follow up with some questions kind of scattered about the various, the 3 different speakers for including Marshall. So next we have Ann Krelock. And thank you, Ann, for joining us. She is, for the last 4 years, she's been the planning and program manager for Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. She has been able to build a really robust environmental compliance program. She's built and continued to develop productive relationships with the environmental community, land management agencies, regulatory agencies, fire districts, cities, counties, basically everyone who's participated in this. It's really been impressive to watch. She has also been managing about a $22 million annual revenue for the county to be able to address wildfire prevention in Marin. She came to the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority after 18 years as a senior environmental specialist for Sonoma County Water Agency. She also was the South Bay field rep for Greenbelt Alliance for a year, has nearly 6 years as a firefighter type 2 qualified practitioner. So she still volunteers on prescribed fires, which is actually very exciting to see. She's been about 5 years as on the the Good Fire Alliance steering committee. So thank you, Ann, for joining us. Please provide a description of your organization and what part of that organizational structure really helps you to get work done on the ground.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, man. So Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is a brand new kind of government agency. We're a joint powers authority. So we're not kind of the typical county department or city department or et cetera. So we don't fit into a specific category super well. We were created through a ballot measure. So after the 2017 fires, I'm a Sonoma County resident. I still live in Santa Rosa. After the Sonoma County fires, the wine country fires, Marin County folks started talking to all the folks in Sonoma County, Napa, and others to try to figure out how to prevent that kind of thing from happening in Marin. So a couple of different reports came out, one through the county and the fire department, the county fire department, and another through a civil grand jury. They basically all came up with the same recommendations, which was you need a centralized wildfire prevention, resilience kind of hub agency that doesn't yet exist, and you need a steady revenue. So their solution was to go out to the voters through Measure C. Measure C passed in 2020, in March of 2020, right before COVID hit. I have no idea what would have happened if it had been delayed and the vote had happened during COVID. I may not be here today talking to you about this. But there was great, I think it passed 70.8% of the vote, a lot of support. And I'll talk a little bit more about the kind of collaboration that led to support. But anyway, that ballot measure provides a 10 cents per developed square foot parcel tax. So the voters of Marin, the residents of Marin, are paying for wildfire resilience for 10 years. It's a 10-year tax. And we created this joint powers authority. So what I've been working on in the last 4 years is creating a new government department and setting up an environmental compliance process and program where you're really getting stuff done. And the environmental compliance is thorough and thoughtful. And we're thinking about stewardship on the landscape, but we're being fast. We have a lot of projects on the landscape and a lot of pressure to get things done. I'll just talk a little bit about kind of our overall structure. It's complicated, so you'd think that nothing gets done, but we're actually really efficient and we're getting a lot done. So with 17 member agencies, those with taxing and fire authority, they're the ones who passed the ballot measure. There are 19 agencies that could have passed the ballot measure and 2 opted out. They're Tiburon and Belvedere. They're kind of surrounded by water and are like, maybe not this time. We'll see what happens next time. But 17 agencies with taxing and fire authority. So the county of Marin, various cities, various fire districts are my people. They're the member agencies. We have a board of directors, elected officials from each of those member agencies. So county supervisor, various city council people, representatives from various fire district boards. We have an operations committee, and they, set policy, kind of set overall direction, approve, large budget items, things like that. Approve projects. We have an operations committee, which is city managers and fire chiefs, and they are instrumental in kind of setting some of the priorities for the annual work plan development. I can talk about that more, but every year we take about 6 months to come up with projects and proposals for the next fiscal year, how to spend those dollars. And then kind of underneath that operations committee is a technical committee, and that's more staff level, and it's more meant to be a working group from all the different member agencies. We also have representatives from non-member agencies on that technical group, including Tori Norville here, UC Cooperative Extension is part of that. We've got PG&E participating, national parks, state parks, county parks, Marin Water, Fire Safe Marin, our local Fire Safe Council, and a representative from the environmental community. So, and then kind of under that, I meet with the environmental community regularly, very, very regularly from kind of the get-go. Really about building trust there and showing our work and checking in. I want no surprises. So I check in with them multiple times a month and say, hey, these projects are coming up. Do you have any concerns? I take their feedback. I also worked with them on kind of a set of, they're like best management practices. They're not called that, but they're like best management practices with all their priorities. And all that got baked into everything we do in projects. So that whole structure ends up meaning that you've got a lot of input from a lot of different people, a lot of stakeholders. There are still deadlines to get stuff done. We can't deliberate forever. And there are no surprises. I don't want any surprises. Once a project gets approved, it's been public and talked about in multiple meetings, multiple times. I don't want, a lawsuit or a monkey wrench thrown into the process at the last minute. So that's the idea. We end up, it's a lot of work and a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings and a lot of agendas, but we're getting stuff done and not getting held up, knock on wood, by lawsuits and things, kind of surprises at the 11th hour.
All right, wow, that's a great description of the types of things you're involved with and the structure of the program. Sounds very complicated. Thank you for all the work you're doing there. Similarly, Roberta McIntyre and Marshall Tuberville are leading the charge with the recently approved Measure H funding here in Sonoma County. And Roberta, I wondered if you could handle the same question. What is it about the organization that you feel really makes it helpful to be able to apply fuel treatments on the ground? Maybe provide a little bit of background on what the Measure H is intended to do.
Sure. So with the long history of Fire Safe Sonoma, um, we've been historically kind of like the go-to entity to bring people together, to come to consensus, get stuff done. You know, we work really closely. We're a private nonprofit with a 10-member board. And in a moment here, you'll have 4 board members in. It's not quite, well, yeah, almost a quorum. Anyway, so we basically, we put people together to get stuff done. We also share whatever resources we have available with everyone who is working in the wildland fire safety and risk reduction space. We consider ourselves an inclusive organization, not an exclusive organization. Over the past several years, we've gotten really focused on building Firewise communities. We went from about 5 Firewise communities 3 or 4 years ago to now 20. Well, now 29. We had 28 just before the end of last year. We're hoping to get to 30 before the end of the year. Didn't quite make it. So we're growing Firewise communities faster than you can grow bamboo, which is an invasive species and terrible. Anyway, I'll try not to, what do you call it? Do the weave too much. And so, yeah, and so we're meant to be just an organization to pull people together and help come to consensus on stuff and get stuff done. We work real close with the California Fire Safe Council. We work very closely with our unit, specifically our county CAL FIRE representatives. We consider ourselves almost an extension of CAL FIRE's Fire Prevention Division within Sonoma County. We work very closely with Sonoma County Fire Chiefs Association, and in particular, the sub-org of that group, the Sonoma County Fire Prevention Officers Association. We have a standing agenda. We're on their monthly agenda as a entity where we report out monthly with them. We work very closely with county government here. I have worked in county government. Kim, oh, actually, Kim didn't have my bio.
Yeah, so I totally did you a disservice there, as
that's okay. It's my bad. I didn't give you a bio.
I'm just gonna going back. This is the total facilitators fail, but nevertheless, Roberta has 35 years of fire service, which is phenomenal. She has a degree in fire science. She is a California Office of State Fire Marshals certified fire marshal. She started doing volunteer firefighting in 1980, and then was picked up by a local fire department to be able to do a couple of years work there. A couple of years later, has been working on fire suppression for such a long time, but then started making this transition into fire prevention. Became a fire inspector, and that's really kind of what's been driving her now into retirement. She's supposed to be retired, but she works probably 45 hours a day, and so we really appreciate all the work, and I apologize for not being able to provide that introduction.
Oh, no worries. I forgot to send it to you, so you did a good job with what you're able.
I was able to glean the internet. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so regardless, so to the point of where we are here today, moving forward, Fire Safe Sonoma it looks like we're going to be in a position to manage some of the Measure H funds that are headed in the direction of countywide fire services work. So Measure H was passed last year. Measure H is meant to provide all of Sonoma County Fire Services with funding to increase their level of services. And what that means is they'll have funding to hire staff, to make some capital improvements, build fire, stations, do fire station remodels, also to, increase training. Some of the funds are meant to help our dispatch center. There's funding in the measure for that. With all that said, there is a carve out of that pot of money for wildland fire safety and risk reduction work. Most of the funds are meant for work on the ground. Fire Safe Sonoma is meant to be a recipient of $250,000 annually of the carve out for the wildland fire safety work or pot of money to help us maintain our staff and overhead and assist with a large portion of the management of a chunk of funds set aside for vegetation management and wildland fire safety and risk reduction work. So nothing's in writing, well, nothing's agreed to in writing yet. So anything I tell you today is meant to be conceptual or a work in progress. We're working very closely with the Fire Chiefs Association and the Fire Services Working Group and their attorney, as well as others, in building the infrastructure to move basically, well, roughly $3 million a year from sales tax into the wildland fire safety and risk reduction space. And so our concept is, and when I say concept, it's not like a Donald Trump concept, it's actually written down. We're starting to write all our policies, et cetera, and build the infrastructure. And conceptually at this point, we're imagining that Fire Safe Sonoma as board will have a committee of around 16 agency representatives that will be handed applications for funding. And then that committee will review those applications and make a decision whether to fund them with that roughly $3 million a year or not. And that's really the Reader's Digest version of where we're at.
That's great, and that's kind of what we were hoping for in this this phase. We'll go through a couple other questions to each of the panelists and be able to get a little bit more detail. Maybe I'll go to Ann on this next one. Let's think about how your program engages the public. I'm sure you're very familiar with all the different ways in which to reach the public, but I'm wondering what has been most effective and how does the public provide input or at least learn more about what fuel treatments you're prioritizing from year to year?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, the public involvement is really key. In Marin, we've got a lot of stakeholders. I know it's true in Sonoma County too, but there are a lot of very engaged residents in Marin. It started, like public involvement started before the ballot measure was even written. Folks went to the environmental community to ask what it would take to get support and went to the taxpayer associations to ask what it would take to get support. So the environmental community wanted input and influence and to be part of the process. So the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership was formed and reps from all sorts of different environmental groups take part in that. And that's kind of the main environmental partner in what we do. I meet with them again regularly, at least once, usually twice, sometimes 3 times in a month. In the beginning, that partnership was really key because we drafted they drafted and I helped finalize their guidance for us, like what they want to see in our projects. And then those kind of best management practices wish list items were then incorporated into our own internal project related veg management practice guidelines. We call them project design and implementation features. They get baked into all of our veg management projects. So I want them to see every project ahead of time and give input ahead of time. I don't want surprises in public meetings. I don't want anybody to feel like we're trying to hide anything. Transparency is key. So I meet with them, share, hey, this is where work is going to happen. What are your concerns? So that's a big one. And then with the Taxpayers Association, they wanted the tax to not be in perpetuity. So it's only a 10-year tax. So we're going to have to go back to the voters very soon to renew that tax measure. So that was the concession there. And then throughout all of these, every year we build a work plan for the next fiscal year. So those work plan proposals come from the member agencies, staff, and Marin Wildfire, my colleagues and myself. They get posted, those draft proposals get posted online. Everybody can see them and take a look and know what's coming. They get discussed in public meetings. They can provide public comment. We've got our technical committee, which includes the environmental community, all the different land management agencies, UC Cooperative Extension, etc. Get all that input. Again, transparency is key. And then once it goes to the board, the public could comment, but by that time, they've seen the projects and the programs and the proposals multiple times in multiple settings. And then once we're out there, implementing projects, we're hosting public field trips. So we want people to come out and see the projects, ask questions in the field, poke around, say, why was this cut? Why was that not cut? So we actually have a field trip tomorrow. If anybody wants to join, it's around the Ring Mountain area, and I can put a link in the chat to that project webpage. We have project web pages for all of the veg management projects. We also have an interactive map with all of the approved polygons visible to the public to see. Again, just trying to build trust, no surprises, do what we said we were going to do, and bring people out to see the work in person. So those have been really key components of that. In the beginning, we had, some very low impact projects in very weedy locations, kind of in between the highway and a trailer park kind of thing. A lot of non-native stuff that went to the board for approval. And then all this kind of public comment came up, what about sensitive species and this and that and the other. And it was like, okay, it's clear that if a weedy field full of, star thistle and broom is going to cause controversy, I need to step up all of this communication. So it's been really successful so far. And I'll just note that what I'm talking about right now is veg management projects, but we have a million other types of projects going on. We do house out work. So we're doing 20 to 30,000 home inspections every year. So we have defensible space inspectors, about 50 to 60 defensible space inspectors interacting with the public on a regular basis, doing home evaluations, making recommendations. We have a grant specialist who's writing reimbursement checks to residents who are doing the things found in those inspections for home hardening and D-space. So we've done about 100,000 or more inspections of homes so far. And then we have direct assistance programs where we're going out with a contractor to their home and removing Italian, cypress or juniper, things like that, in zones 0 and 1. So there's a lot of public participation. I also forgot to mention our Citizens Oversight Committee, so I'll just leave it there and stop talking.
Okay, thank you, Ann. That's really quite in depth. And Joe, I wonder if you could provide a similar response relative to Napa Firewise. How is your program focused on outreach to the community and allowing the public to provide input to the projects that you guys are prioritizing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess at a few different levels. So at the aggregate countywide level, we secured the funds and then sort of really drove the process to create the countywide CWPP. That involved just multiple entities and agencies and community outreach meetings, et cetera, and solicitation of feedback on the document as it evolved. The document's 3.5 years old now. So that generated a good deal of the sort of project things, that are sort of within the countywide CWPP. Then for each of our 22 fire safe councils, we actually go through the process of creating their own local FSC CWPP. And that similarly involves a lot of outreach and working with the community in community meetings and drafting of the document and soliciting information about local projects priorities, not just fuel, but everything from radio networks to signage to community events, local fundraising, et cetera. So, those are sort of means by which we solicit community input. Because we sort of operate in this shared services capacity, all of our marketing and outreach functions, we have the ability to do on behalf of the Fire Safe Council. So to the extent that they want to do their own communication, we support that. But we also send information out to all of the supervisors, to our entire mailing list, which is always growing, to all of our Fire Safe Councils about projects that are on the horizon, projects just completed, status of various funding things that we're pursuing. We're part of the Napa Pre-Fire Working Group, which includes a whole bunch of folks. It's kind of like our Sonoma counterparts, that many of whom are on this call, but just in Sonoma. And we're sort of at the steering committee level there, but then we work with the entire Pre-Fire Working Group. That's, again, sort of a place where we talk about all projects going on across the various agencies. We coordinate on all the communication with counties, so we sort of drive multiple channels of communication at the county level, Napa County Fire, CAL Fire, and then all of our comms. So, we rely a lot on our Fire Safe Councils as kind of that connective tissue out into the community to both get information and to provide information. We do maintain this dashboard here, which is sort of the geospatial map of all projects that are currently underway, contemplated, where they are with their funding, what the funding source is, completed or not completed. So those are probably a handful of examples of how we work with community and sort of solicit information and then provide information. We're really programmatically organized in two ways. The largest area is hazardous fuel reduction, which is an array of different projects. Many of you all are familiar with these, county roads, limited access roads, perimeter fuel breaks, and then sort of larger landscape level fuel mitigation, forest health work, et cetera. And then wildfire preparedness, which is where we're managing all of our outreach and education, Fire Safe Council work, all our defensible space cost share programs, home evaluation programs, and all of our landowner services that we've developed, kind of fee for services. So those are sort of, wildfire preparedness includes all of those things. Then hazardous fuel reduction consists of sort of the normal priorities that you have on HFR. And I think that's probably a pretty good overview of all that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. That's a great download. And how about back to you, Roberta? What do you think has been the best tool for you to use in order to get more information out about Measure H? I know kind of the dust is settling, but how do you see the public participating and providing feedback on the priorities that they feel are important? How is that information going to be received? Through Fire Safe Sonoma or through the Measure H committees?
So we're imagining, and again, I'm speaking just to those funds from Measure H that are meant for wildfire safety and risk reduction. So we're going to work really closely with the folks that we've been working with and continue to work with on the ground. So within our framework, similar to what they have in Napa, we work really closely with our Firewise communities all over and local fire safe councils that are still out there. So, we work directly with them, and we'll be encouraging them to, bring projects forward. And when I say bring projects forward, that doesn't mean we just want them to hand us an idea for a project. We expect folks to work with their local fire entity. If you're in the city of Santa Rosa, you're working with Santa Rosa Fire Department. If you're in Pengrove, you're working with, Rancho Adobe, or if you're in Cotati, you're working with them, etc. So we will be encouraging our folks to look at their Firewise risk assessments. And Joe kind of alluded to that a little bit. When you become a Firewise, you do a local, it's kind of like a miniature CWPP. You do a local risk assessment, you identify priority projects, and then we will be encouraging people to take their priority projects and help them with project design to fully develop those projects. What that means is we want to see people figure out how long that project's gonna take. You know, who are the likely contractors? How much is it gonna cost? What are your resources? Does it require environmental review? Does the environmental review fit within the Cal VTP? Is it gonna be an easy button or is this something harder? Things like that. So we'll be collaborating with local communities on this project design and demanding, not encouraging, but demanding that they will work with local fire. And then once the project is pretty well designed, then the fire person that they're working with will submit the project into a portal that we'll have for requests for funding. And then the committee that is created to review those projects will, I'm imagining twice a year, sit and look over those and rank them. And the committee is meant to be, again, agency representatives, but they're meant to be, subject matter experts. And so I'm imagining they will have the KSA's knowledge, skills, and abilities to assess whether that project is right to be funded at this point in time. And one of the things they'll be looking at, I imagine, will be the geography. What's the most important geography to work on now? And how many projects are within this particular geography? The flip side to that is we expect those folks to also be connecting with the folks doing the project design to help them assess whether the project's likely to get funded just now, et cetera. So a lot of moving parts. The framework feels to me like it's relatively simple, but within that framework is a lot of complication and moving parts. Also, I want to make sure you all know that I am not writing, or Fire Safe Sonoma is not writing the procedures for that committee, the project review committee. We're writing rough rules to follow, but our expectation is once that committee convenes, their first few times convening, they will establish their own rules for when they're going to meet, how they're going to review the projects at their level, et cetera. So that's what we're looking at moving forward.
That's great. Thank you very much, Roberta. I know it's hard to contemplate exactly how it's all going to roll out because it really is a relatively new program, and the funding source is just finally solid to be able to do that. So we'll be anxious to touch base with you again on how people can get more information about it. So let's go to back to Joe and see if we can get thinking about how you see your organization. Where does it go in the next 5 to 10 years? In particular, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that need to be overcome either in Napa or Sonoma County or neighboring counties? Similarly, maybe you have some specific outcomes that you envision over a 5 or 10 year period. Would you like to address that first, Joe?
Sure. Let me just see if I can. Do I have the ability to share a slide really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Just you should be able to share your screen.
Are you seeing that?
Not yet. It's coming up though, I'm sure. Yes, we do see it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody probably recognizes that funding is a challenge, and getting arms around funding is a challenge. When we in Napa early on, as we completed the countywide CWPP and we started to aggregate all these projects, we sort of tried to understand, conceptually, what are we talking about here in terms of the size of the challenge that we face in terms of dollars. And so we've sort of pegged substantially improving wildfire resilience in the county at around 255 million over a decade. But we've made a lot of substantial progress towards that goal, that objective. Our annual funding, really just through fundraising, various grants that we pursue, some county funding, et cetera, at Napa Firewise is around anywhere from 12 to 15 million. And so when we look at the size of the challenge, we peg it at about 255, and that essentially assumes that somewhere in sort of 2-3 years out here, we'll have a decent maintenance regime, and we'll be sort of at a run rate on maintenance for some of the major projects. And by major projects, I mean not necessarily landscape, but sort of county roads, perimeter fuel breaks, and things like that. So when we look at total funding, if we think county roads, perimeter fuel breaks, we look at over a decade, it's about 77 million bucks. And we think that at some point in there, we're a smaller county. So Sonoma's what, 3x our size, maybe 4x our size. When we look at the county roads, which the county largely recognizes they have an obligation on, we put that number at around 77 million. We've already completed the fuel reduction on all the major county roads, or we have the funds and we'll complete them like this year, next year. We've done all the perimeter fuel breaks, so now we're sort of shifting into this maintenance mode. Then there's kind of FEMA money, which will really fund at scale all the defensible space and ignition resistant construction cost share work, and a bunch of really large landscape level projects. And so we think over the next decade, we need about 78 million. We've already secured 61 through 3 different FEMA grants. Those will pay out over the next 5 years. But it's really important that the county has a really good experience. They're reimbursement based, they're complex. We need to make sure that the county has a great experience. We kick butt on those things. We deliver on all the major milestones so that they have an appetite to chase another 17 million. And then there's just kind of all of our grant writing, which is CAL FIRE, CFSC, PG&E, CWDG, et cetera. We've been pretty successful with a pretty high win rate over the last 5 years chasing these grants. When we look out over the next decade, we think, we'll win a third of the time, and we think we could probably raise another 35 million. And that's largely to cover things like, in some cases, county roads, but it's really sort of larger scale forest health, fuel management work, some dozer containment work or dozer improvement lines, and it's kind of more out in the hinterlands. And then there's sort of the issue of how do we improve achieve wildfire resilience on private land, and we sort of peg that number. We've identified about 50,000+ acres. I'm not covering the eastern part of the county, which is BLM BOR, and there's this thing called the CAL FIRE BLM BOR Good Neighbor Authority. We're going to chase that money every single year, but we think we'll probably win a third of the time, and maybe that's 15 million bucks over the next decade. We have a whole strategy around private land and how do we work with landowners. It's called our Valley Stewards Initiative. Way too detailed to probably dig into here, but I'd be happy to talk about it with other folks at some point. So when we look at sort of major challenges in the future and sort of how we're organized, obviously we face this sort of existential risk related to insurance. That much worse now with the LA fires. We're probably likely to see this FAIR plan. I mean, who knows? The thing could implode and be insolvent. That's probably going to force some change, but it's really clear to us that we need to essentially align the capacities and capabilities of Napa Firewise, all of the agencies that we work with, and really sort of embrace and try to advance some specific initiatives that achieve and improve wildfire resilience in ways that move the needle on insurance. And we've got a strategy on that. We've developed it with a whole approach that we've developed with CAL FIRE within the unit. And I'm in discussions with a number of folks in Sonoma right now about how we can take that approach, spread it unit wide, and really achieve kind of a difference. The strategy that we developed, this approach that we developed with a bunch of larger donors in the valley, with the unit at the sort of Marcucci and now Ryan level, and also with a bunch of insurance companies. A lot of detail to go into, probably can't cover it in this call, but I'd be happy to brief people on it, at another time. So I think that was kind of your main question, is just challenges on the horizon. I mean, certainly the insurance is a major one. Ongoing funding is one, but I think we got a pretty good handle on funding. It's always stressful. Like whoever it was, I think it was the RCD, you all just completed a forest health grant. We did two of them, submitted 2 of them. That grant cycle is just, we kind of have a pretty good sense of what the cycle is when we do it. We have a way of feeding from our portfolio into those grants. But it's not a durable, sustained funding mechanism, and we're good at it, but it has its challenges and its sort of lack of predictability.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful.
That's a really helpful slide, and thank you for going through all those different strategies that you have. And it sounds like you have some very innovative approaches to things, and it's really great for Sonoma County, who's less advanced than that, trying to understand exactly how these programs are fitting together. Maybe let's go to Ann on the same question. It's like, where do you see Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority moving in the next 5 to 10 years? You obviously have a curtain call at the end of 5 years to reauthorize the authority, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges you're really running into, and how do you what maybe innovative approaches have you taken to try to make sure that this is sustainable?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the ballot measure is a big one. We need to go back to the voters in a couple of years to get reauthorized. As part of that conversation, how do you prove a negative when success is so quiet? Disaster is loud. If homes don't burn in Marin or your other communities, that's pretty quiet, and it doesn't really make the headlines. There wasn't a fire today. So one of the things we're doing is really diving into the science and the data and the modeling around fire risk in Marin, and trying to contribute to the bigger picture around this. So one of our challenges right now is taking models and data that we've been working on now for a couple of years with different contractors. One was around evacuation routes and all the different factors that make evacuation routes less safe. We've ranked all the roadways in Marin in terms of risk according to various parameters. We also have pathways modeling showing how fire would most likely move across the landscape according to terrain, wind, topography, vegetation, etc. Which areas are most at risk, through according to that tool. We have various tools to use. And we're collecting all of this data now in our veg management projects, but also with all those inspections, those home inspections and the re-inspections, which issues came up that were resolved. So we've got a lot of data and a lot of modeling and a lot of opportunity to use science to measure how much we're reducing risk across the landscape, and to figure out where there's a lot of risk remaining. And then, so right now I'm working on incorporating all those tools and data and models into our planning process, our annual planning process. So working with all the different member agencies to get them on board and familiar. So incorporating science in a real measurable way. Then, in addition to that, trying to incorporate that into the messaging around the ballot measure, and then also engaging in the insurance conversation. So just as Joe mentioned, as we all know, insurance is going to be an increasingly major topic of conversation. How do we reward the communities that are doing all of this great work? So collecting all this data becomes quite valuable in terms of that modeling that can quantify how much risk is being reduced in not always at the home level, but at the neighborhood level and community level. So we've been engaging with a lot of partners to think through how our data can, the privacy can be protected for individual homeowners, but the aggregate data can be used towards the cat risk models that inform the insurance industry, and try to figure out how to reward the communities that are being proactive. So that's going to be a big focus for the next few years.
That's great. That's really helpful. And I really think the value of all of this work is really helpful for Sonoma County to think about, how do we replicate these things? You have a completely different land dynamic in Marin, same with Napa. And so we're trying to figure out what are the tools that really could hit on all cylinders in this county. And so maybe go back to Roberta for the same question.
Kim, I have a question for Ann.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It might be good to ask too, if there's
Sure.
other folks that have questions.
Yeah, I was gonna do that after we got Roberta's done, but
Just sometimes if if people have questions and we wait till the end, they won't remember.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Personally, I sometimes forget my questions if it's wait till the end, so, yeah, thank you, and I just wanna say that's amazing, the number of assessments that keeps jumping out in my head. You said 100,000?
Yeah, over 100,000, that's a conservative estimate. We've got 54 inspectors that come on every year, get trained up every year, plus member agencies that do their own inspections. So there are 20 to 30,000 inspections happening every year.
That is insane. I mean, I thought there was only like 90,000 parcels in Marin. What's the percentage of participation across the county then? Like, is it like 90% participation? What's the?
Ooh, I'd have to go back to the math and the number of households in Marin. I can't remember, but we're about a third of the size and land area of Sonoma County. I'd have to go back and give you those numbers, but I do know
It's okay.
that
It's just astounding, and it's really astounding and impressive. I mean, we have, I think, 187,000 parcels here in Sonoma County. I think you all have about 90,000, but of course you have more homes than that. But it's just an astounding number.
we're trying to do re-inspections as well, so we can measure change over time. So at every parcel, there might be 200 different things logged into the software that we're using. We're using Fireside and an iPad or tablet. That all goes into the database and modeling, and we can look at risk parcel by parcel and a discovery by discovery. So weight the different discoveries on the parcel in terms of their importance and their contribution to risk at the home and the neighborhood and community level. And then if we can measure that change over time, then we're measuring how much we're reducing risk.
And how, I mean, my big question on that, because a lot of times we're talking about public lands, but I know with a lot of the work that Kim has done and others is getting private landowners to work with us, and getting them to apply for grants, and then we do the technical advisory and get it done, or they let us on their property. In terms of getting folks to request or participate or volunteer, what was that's just so significant compared to what we've been able to do in Sonoma County with the SoCo Adapts, Wildfire Adapted Program, for instance, and assessments and sort of buy-in. Your number is just astounding. And is there something specific that where you're able to get that level of participation?
We have the one-on-one interactions with the inspectors who go out and knock on doors. We also have, part of our funding, around $1 million a year, is going to our local Fire Safe Council, Fire Safe Marin, who then is functioning kind of our public education department. And they reach out and have huge campaigns and banners and signs on the sides of buses, open your report. So big push for that. And so we're getting about a 65% rate. I hope I'm right on that, but about a 65% rate of people opening their reports and doing at least something, addressing at least one discovery within their report. We're also seeing that with our grants to residents, the reimbursement and direct assistance, that we're getting a multifold benefit. So if we spend $1 changing out vents or do something that's visible and the neighbors see, those residents are doing, 5, 6, 7, 8 times what we're paying for on those parcels. So it's inspiring a lot of work.
We see a similar number when we do our cost share programs. It's like a 4-to-1. So for every dollar we provide in cost share, we're unlocking, an additional $4 or so in investment and resilience. And are the inspections that you're doing the LE 100, or are they enhanced? Are they covering more than just the LE 100?
I don't know. I'd have to get back.
Sounds like they are. We use Fireside as well. And
okay. Yeah,
probably
it's probably
pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
And some of those inspections are from the public right of way, and because you need to get permission to do the perimeter of the home, but a significant portion of those are full inspections to do the entire home.
Yeah, and the take that we did in Napa is we basically focused on folks that were in the high and very high or adjacent severity zones, fire severity zones. So like in the case of Napa, we're a smaller county, it's 133,000 total population, but we've got 5,141. So that's like our universe. That's our sales universe. That's what we're trying to focus on. And so, that's kind of the way that we look at it.
All right, I'd like to open it up to other folks. Or does anybody else have any other questions to the panelists? I have a few back of the pocket questions if no one has other ideas, but please feel free to raise your hand or unmute. Go ahead, Caitlin.
You're muted out, Caitlin. We can't hear you.
This is a really fascinating conversation. I know all three of you, and I'm sure that you three are pretty familiar with each other's programs. So this is maybe sort of a delicate question, but like, I wonder if you could say what you think your program, I don't know, I don't want to say like does better than the others, but like, what are the particular strengths of your program sort of in comparison? Like, what do you think your sort of secret sauce is that enables you to do X in a way that seems to be like the best way to do it?
You want me to take it? That's a tricky question. I mean, I could take a
Tricky
stab at it.
question.
I don't know enough about, I mean, I think that, we benefit from a lot of centralization, and there's a lot of efficiency that we have some structural advantages from that standpoint. We're a much smaller county. If I look at Sonoma, it's a different environment. And Caitlin, I've spoken to a bunch of folks in Sonoma about this because we have all these things we're trying to do on the county line, and it's sort of like, how does it work? Who's our Firewise in Sonoma? And it is Fire Safe Sonoma, I think, broadly. But I sort of, Fire Safe Sonoma is, I guess in my mind, I want to figure out like how do we create a Fire Safe Sonoma that has maybe the same kind of capacity that's actually applying for all the grants and running all the projects, and I just sort of look for what's that centralized entity that's in Sonoma. It's not totally clear to me what that is, but I think it's probably a discussion or a topic that's worthy of sort of analysis. And I think Sonoma is trying to figure that out, right? Marin has that centralization. It's the Wildfire Prevention Authority, but I don't remember if it was my conversation with you, and in some respects, the way the tax measure works, you wind up actually creating the districts all have their own sort of functions. So in some respects, you don't necessarily achieve the centralization of the sort of core services, if I recall correctly. But I mean, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is doing amazing things, and it's definitely cracked the nut in terms of pre-fire funding and programmatically scaling out a lot of these services across Marin. But I think that the question you ask, Caitlin, is one that requires probably tighter, better coordination, more sort of cross-pollination to figure out what we can learn and better leverage from some of these practices elsewhere, and what we might be able to share with our neighboring counties.
Yeah, it's such a great conversation. I guess to add to your comments, Joe, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority acts kind of like a hub in the wagon wheel of all the wildfire prevention efforts in Marin County. We're not trying to take any of the existing prevention efforts away from any of the cities or fire districts or the county. In fact, in the JPA, we are not allowed to kind of supplant those activities and those funds. This all needs to be above and beyond that. So what we try to do is find a balance between centralizing things that are more efficient at a centralized level. So like these inspectors, we've got 50 to 60 and 54 inspectors each year who go out and inspect all these neighborhoods and all these homes. It's growing. At first, it was more, it was a little smaller, and now the member agencies are like, we really like this program. We want to contribute and be part of that instead of having our own program because it's more efficient. And so the model allows for that adjustment and that change according to what's working and what's not. And then there are some things like the environmental compliance piece that's just more efficient. If it's a hub in the wagon wheel, it happens with me and my consultants, and we figured out, and we have a consistent approach for all the core vegetation management projects, rather than each individual agency trying to figure it out on their own, with a lot of these folks who are fire folks trying to be planners and figure out how to plan a shaded fuel break and not get in trouble. So we've got a template, we've got a process, we have the stakeholders already engaged. We can do it quickly and efficiently and in a way that were there to be a lawsuit, we would have a substantial amount of evidence in our favor to back that up. But there are other things that individual agencies want to do on their own. They know their own jurisdiction, they know their neighbors. And so I think that's one of the secret sauce elements of this model. It allows for centralization where it makes sense, but it doesn't require it. So the different member agencies can do their own thing if that's what they want, or they can jump on board and be part of a more efficient process. The Marin model, I think there are parts of it that would work for a lot of different entities, and maybe not the whole model will work by plunking it down onto whatever county you're talking about. I mean, Butte County, I don't know that it's going to work there, but I think it's worth kind of analyzing. Some folks at Stanford really dug into our model and how we came about and have been creating reports and updated reports and really diving into it. And so there's some really good resources out there if you want to dive into what's working and what's not. The other piece, just last thing, building relationships and trust has been huge. Transparency has been huge. I think we've avoided a lot of unnecessary delays and drama by engaging with everybody we think is going to oppose any of the work early and getting their input and incorporating that into our projects and then showing our work later. Field trips, public input, very visible.
Yeah,
Oh.
field trips and visibility are critical.
Yeah,
We
so
do a
let
lot
me
of that.
chime in.
That's
to
great.
kind of
Thank you, Ann.
compare and contrast here. I know, Jason, you've got your hand up, so please excuse me. So to compare and contrast, both of you guys, Marin County and Napa with Fire Safe Sonoma, we don't have the breadth of resources that you all have. You guys work really closely with your county government. You have a funding stream that ours pales in comparison, even once we start having an infusion of major H funds. With that said, our the major work we do is building those relationships, Ann, that you had mentioned. That doesn't cost a lot. We have staff, we're out there growing Firewise. That is something we do well. And I look at our position as we're not a governing entity. We can't make policy. We can't make people do things. In Sonoma County, there's a lot of free-spirited people and entities. And what we do at Fire Safe Sonoma is we manage an evolution. So we are continuing to do the best we can do in the space. We continue to work with folks on getting grants, writing grants, obtaining grants, managing grants, et cetera, things like that. Spreading education, outreach, growing interests, et cetera. We can't demand any of that in any way, shape, or form. And no offense, Kim, but our county government hasn't been nearly as engaging in this topic as I believe your county governments have been with regard to wildland fire safety and risk reduction. Chris, if you want to speak to that, feel free. But that's kind of how I feel it is in Sonoma County. So again, we're inclusive. We try to build bridges, build relationships, use that horsepower, the synergy from that to do more with less. And that's kind of where we're at. I'll leave it there.
That's fine. Thank you on that comment, Roberta. Let's go to Jason first and then back to Joe.
Hey guys, what a poignant conversation. I just got to thank everybody for having it. I mean, with what's going on in LA, it's really just amplified this whole situation. My question has to do with like specific on the ground work. as a practitioner myself, I've been very curious about environmental compliance. And Anne, you mentioned some of those concerns and how they overlap with invasive species management. We're all at different phases of implementation here. So, the cross-pollination to learn from each other, and Marin, Sonoma, and Napa County. I hope we have more conversations along these lines. But my question is, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, at these various phases, if we're doing roadside work, if we're doing defensible space, and if we are starting to see these things as not just fuel reduction, but actual vegetation management, where we're taking it down to a scale of, invasive species and now managing for invasive species, have you guys started to see, as we're entering the phases of, now returning to those sites and carrying out maintenance regimes for these areas that have been treated, a reduction in cost over time by addressing problematic species? And you mentioned you're looking at, the effectiveness of defensible space and tracking that over time. I'm wondering if we have programs to track the effectiveness of our wildland fuel reduction over time.
Anne, do you want to respond to that? And then Joe, do you want to follow her?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. This is such a great question. So we just worked with Green Info Network, who's our GIS contractor, to set up a GIS program and help us work with the different member agencies to develop our kind of data collection and monitoring program. We've got the basics now down. We're going to add some more kind of bits and pieces that we'd like to measure over time, such as broom removal and what's coming up after we remove it, how often we need to maintain it, things like that. We're also tracking cost. So in this first round of data collection for shaded fuel breaks, we've collected 480 polygons of project implementation over the last few years and up till, I don't know, September of 2024. And so we're trying to track cost and what activities are happening within each polygon, etc. We're looking at broom regrowth and maintenance costs over time, but we're still in the process of collecting all that information and figuring out how to use it and how to calculate maintenance costs over time. So in the beginning, when we first started up, it was like everybody was very excited to propose a whole bunch of new polygons on the map. Now we're proposing fewer new projects and trying to figure out how to best maintain existing projects. We've got a 60-mile long shaded fuel break around Novato, a 38-mile long shaded fuel break around Central Marin, like 10 jurisdictions in Central Marin, on steep slopes, broom up to 11 feet tall, hand crews, chipping, northern spotted owl to avoid, all sorts of things that contribute a ton to cost. So the cost varies wildly across the landscape. So we're tracking that and trying to figure out how to use that data, how to use the models to figure out bang for the buck. So the pathways modeling, the other risk modeling can help us hone in on where the most critical places are to go back and do that maintenance. Are there areas that maybe it's a shaded fuel break, a pathway runs right into it? Do we then widen that project area a little bit? Do we do a whole bunch of additional home hardening defensible space in the portion of the community where that pathway intersects with our shaded fuel break in the community? We're trying to figure out the biggest bang for the buck and what that phrase even means. Is it number of households? Is it reducing flame length to under 4 feet where you could potentially do direct attack in that area? There are a lot of conversations that are happening right now. We've been having regular meetings with all up and down the kind of different agencies to figure out, with the scientists and the modelers and the biologists, to figure out what that means and how to use that information. So that was a very long-winded answer to a really complicated question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anne. Not only long-winded, but an excellent answer. Thanks for the question, Jason. Let's go to Joe. If you wanted to comment either on the question that that Jason asked, or if you had something else in mind before he asked his question.
Yeah, so on the maintenance, I mean, there were two elements to his question. One of them, I think, is just maintenance periodicity and what the cost is. So our view is that if you go back and maintain most of these projects on at least a 3-year periodicity, that you can get it done on average, and averages are crazy things, right? But for about 42% of the cost of implementation. So it's a pretty substantial number. And I think that that sort of helps you to get orientated around what's large scale. What are we talking about a cost here when you start building a maintenance regime that's, 10 years out or whatever. So that's kind of the one thing. The last thing I wanted to add, I think we have to kind of wrap up here soon, is, to me, I mean, there's lots of ways that we can coordinate and collaborate, but specifically for me, there's like, one, Prop 4. We got to make sure that our region gets its fair market share of that Prop 4 money. And I worry that if we don't coordinate sooner rather than later, that the existing framework tends towards fragmentation, dissolution, and not really optimizing the maximum value of money that we could get for the North Bay. And so anything that we can do to be sort of better coordinating on that, I think, is a good thing. The other thing I think is that, fire doesn't care about a county border, as we all talk about. So to the extent that we can work to coordinate around geospatial data so that we're making better decisions about where we make these resilience investments, hugely important. Oftentimes you have all these agencies, we all are well-intentioned to work together, but in the end, we're making decisions without really the knowledge of where these other large investments are being made. And so we don't really maximize the impact of that resilience dollar. The third thing is where I think we probably can coordinate with land trust to figure out a new class of resilience easements and what that means legally and how it translates into the financial benefit for landowners to make investments or to allow investments to be made that actually provide a community benefit. Such a thing doesn't exist in my knowledge now, but I think it needs to, and we got to sort that out. And then last thing is just continuing to look for these ways. We all have our respective strengths, and there are things like that we've developed in Napa that can be applied across the entire unit or even into Marin, like these enhanced resilience areas. And just trying to define solutions that have that sort of extensibility, that they can be leveraged elsewhere. The more we start to speak with the same language and vernacular and the same conceptual framework, it just creates more efficiency. And I think that sort of goes back to this whole Prop 4 thing. How do we get our fair market share of that money in the coming years for the North Bay, I think, is really critical. Those are just a handful of items that I think are out there for us to coordinate on.
Excellent. Thanks for those comments, Joe. Go ahead, Chris.
Just want to say, I appreciate that you brought that up, Joe. We were talking about that before the meeting started. Tragically, I think we can expect that a lot of Prop 4 dollars might be going to Southern California now. But that means, and I don't mean to pass any judgment on that because they need what they need, obviously. At the same time, whatever is maybe left for up here should probably be something we all talk about, or what are the biggest opportunity and highest value areas that we can coordinate together on. Even if it's a much smaller amount than we expected, it'll be on top of mind at the North Coast Resource Partnership Climate Summit, that's for sure.
Thanks, Chris, for that comment. Roberta, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Joe's idea about working at the unit level, particularly with Prop 4, opportunities is key, because having the entire unit working collaboratively to get funds pulled into the unit would be hugely beneficial to both Napa and Sonoma, less so with the other counties because they don't have the density that we do have in our two counties. But regardless, if we could work collaboratively there, that would be an area I would love to collaborate with.
Great, thanks, Roberta. I wanted to introduce our final panelist who's going to make a surprise appearance, and Marshall Tuberville, thank you for joining us. Marshall is well respected in our ranks, and we really appreciate all the help he's provided. And his crew in the Northern Sonoma County Fire District will be managing the fuel treatments on the ground. So it's a unique model. I thought, Marshall, you could provide a little bit of perspective on how you hope those funds will be rolled out, or more importantly, how those treatments will be implemented across the county.
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to try to get my camera working. I was kind of hoping I joined late enough. You might have forgotten about me.
No, I never forget you, Marshall.
Not
Come
a
on
chance,
now.
Marshall.
Nice try for trying to hide in there.
But anyway, yeah. So I don't know what's been covered, and I apologize, but roughly, or it is by law, 5% of the Measure H sales tax will fund personnel to implement vegetation management. Northern Sonoma County Fire District was chosen as the employer. So it gets confusing about the terms like Measure H funded projects, Measure H employees, but it strictly is the employees work for Northern Sonoma County, intended to do work throughout the county of Sonoma. And that includes incorporated cities, because cities are paying the sales tax as well. So it's easy, or probably not even debating, what chainsaws to use and what chippers to use and what to do. I mean, that's the easy part. What we're really kind of discussing is, where do we do it? Where do we prioritize it? Where do we maintain it, etc. And so that is kind of what really needs to get built out, in my opinion. And the counties represented today, Marin and Napa have that process. So that's what's basically driving a planning process to determine where these employees should go cut vegetation that has strategic value. So that's going to be my role, is basically to make sure that these employees go do work where they're told to do work. It's not up to Northern Sonoma County Fire District. It's not up to the fire chiefs in Sonoma County. It's based upon modeling. And so then we can get into science modeling versus opinion modeling versus, do we want to do a little bit of work everywhere modeling? So that's where we're trying to, or Fire Safe Sonoma will get funding. I missed Roberta's presentation, but Fire Safe Sonoma will be leaned upon heavily to be that planning process from project intake all the way to project prioritization, and essentially become one of the third requirements of a community wildfire protection plan for the whole county, because Fire Safe Sonoma in theory could maintain a list of prioritized projects. And then to further elaborate and giving my opinion is, anybody else could basically use that prioritized project list to determine maybe they're just a funding source. They want to go for a grant. Someone came across a PG&E settlement. They could just use that prioritized project list that Fire Safe Sonoma is maintaining on behalf of all the county. And that would also then, remember, it's going to include the cities. So there's really no longer a need for a city to do its own CDPP, really. It should be done at the county level. And the project list will be maintained there. But it is going to drive the need to break the county up into planning units, regions, zones, ecosystems, watersheds. I don't know. But my bias is it's based upon where communities align and want to work together. So we could use urban boundaries like Santa Rosa City, but heck, maybe we put in Mark West in there because it makes sense to plan at that scale. And then I missed some of the stuff Joe talked about, but I've talked to him and Ann a little bit, is we don't just go out and design 2 miles of roadside vegetation management. We go out and design a bunch of roadside management, and all those are individual projects that are part of a program. And then we go to program level planning to do a Cal VTP or whatever it is. So if someone wanted to go get funding, more or less everything's shovel ready. So we're relying upon the fire departments to do the community outreach for the most part. Do the project design, get it into Fire Safe Sonoma. And I'm going to end after this. Northern Sonoma County is just an entity that goes out and does work using Measure H as a funding source. So that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Marshall. Really appreciate that input. Roberta, would you like to comment?
Not necessarily. Yeah, that's consistent with what we've been talking about and where we're headed. But,
okay.
I think you still have your hand up, Roberta. That's why maybe.
Your hand's up.
Oh, it's
so
still up. Sorry. Let me lower hand.
No worries. Thank you. Caitlin, you did have a comment in the chat. So do you want to bring that to the screen?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the plan is for these treatments under Measure H, what's the, instructions to implementers? What kind of practices and standards will they be using in the field? Where do their prescriptions come from? And what's the story with any environmental compliance that's related to that?
I can answer it. It's going to be it's using government employees and government funding, so it'll be full CEQA compliance. So just my perspective here, CEQA compliance is an element of project design, but it's not project design. A lot of people are saying, oh, go do a VTP. I don't like that answer. Let's go out and do outreach. Let's develop projects. And then VTP is an environmental compliance method. So really it's going to be based on BMPs and non-destruction of the environment. So some of the stuff I've written up is if there's going to be a lawsuit, it never makes it. If there's environmental damage, it never even gets considered. So there's going to be ways that we screen out projects or not even consider projects that have any type of environmental damage. So whether it's a notice of exemption for like roadside work, maybe Cal VTP, some places have MNDs. It's going to follow all the requirements. And very simply, my opinion is we want to mimic the role of natural, historical, low intensity wildfire. So it's really not about, just cutting everything down because that's the safest thing to do. We're not going to make this county fireproof. This is just reducing the intensity of future wildfires. So that's what I'm going to push for in everything. So that's just, shaded fuel breaks. It's not going to be bare dirt. It's not going to be a lot of bulldozer work. It's going to be hand treatments. And eventually I'd like to see with the pods and other things, these strategically placed fuel breaks become boundaries for evacuation support, ingress, and large prescribed burning. And if a fire does start, it buys us time to get there, or our traditional firefighting tactics are more effective. So.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Marshall.
The meetings are going to be open too.
questions?
Roberta can comment more too. I was going to say the Fire Safe Sonoma meetings will be open to the public too. So.
Yeah, the review committee meetings will be open to the public. We're going to follow the Open Meetings Act as much as possible.
I'll just, I wanted to share with you towards the end here a little bit about how the county is approaching our strategic planning on the wildfire resilience program. We have been working with these different technical advisory committees. We have 4 different technical advisory committees. One's focused on landscape treatments, another is on home hardening and the house out. Fire mitigation essentially. And then we have 2 others that are focused on climate resilient landscapes, as well as organizational structure and long-term funding. So the purpose of each of these technical advisory committees is to really try to develop strategies that are going to be very focused on that particular perspective and roll that into be able to guide the county on how does each of the departments participate in this process and implement these various strategies that are going to come up to the county administrator's office and the board of supervisors. But those strategies are going to be in the works over the next year. We are working with ERG and WRA as consultants to help facilitate those technical advisory committees. And those consist of a lot of people who are on this panel. We have CAL FIRE is participating, various nonprofit organizations, fire chiefs will be participating in these different technical advisory committees as a way to provide greater input from the different organizations who have a stake in all these different approaches. And so it's really helpful. This is one of our goals, was to be able to understand a little bit more about how Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, how Napa Firewise, how Measure H are being rolled out, so that we can roll that into to figure out how the county can be more efficient in providing services. So far through the Vegetation Management Grant, the FEMA grants, we've been able to do what I think is kind of the research and development of these programs, is get some projects on the ground, see which are successful, figure out what where the gaps are, try to figure out how to accomplish those environmental compliance so that work can get done on the ground. So those factors have really rolled into some of the workshops that we've hosted, trying to raise the bar as a community as a whole on how to implement these effective fuel breaks or fuel treatments on the ground and do it in the most efficient way. So we're cutting our teeth on this, and we really hope that you will participate. Those who live in the county can participate on the design of this. This is our opportunity to plug Joe and Ann to have an active role in helping kind of structure this for a county as large as Sonoma County, with 95% of our forested lands owned in private landholders. We really are faced with very different dynamics than each of those other counties, but we do face a similar threat. And I totally support what Joe's proposing, that we work across county lines to be able to address these things fully and do it in a way that's efficient, try to eliminate the bureaucracy, but have good people on the ground to do the work. So Measure H is certainly helping us try to figure out how to channel funding to fuel treatments, but that's only 5% of the budget. So how do we work with the different fire chiefs so that we're all identifying the right projects? We get the work done. It's got support from the county. It's got support by the fire chiefs. We are all working together in the same motion. So please stay tuned to the types of work that we're doing in the planning part. We hope to be able to present something towards the end of the year on what those strategies would look like on the various levels. So go ahead, Chris.
A quick question for Marshall. Marshall, as you look to build out that crew, that the chosen ones, the chosen employer crew, I think in the past you mentioned you wanted to triple the size of the crew roughly. About how many people are you looking to hire and when?
So we're trying to make these decent paying jobs. So entry level pay will be 70,000 for entry level with benefits is the proposal. So total employees will be around 15. But no, those will not all be entry level. So it'll be about 15 employees all said and done. But you also gotta, this is what's tricky about this whole thing is there's also private industry in Sonoma County that we got to make sure stays intact as well. So it's trying to find that balance where, that's why I'm throwing it out there that if Fire Safe Sonoma can maintain a list of prioritized projects, it's not all Measure H funded. There's other funding going on. So there's other grant opportunities, there's private industry opportunities. And then I'm also going to make a push that if there's some leftover discretionary funding at the fire chief's level, because there's discretionary funding in Measure H, that some of that be used to contract with private industry. So the Northern Sonoma County would have a crew of about 15, broken into modules of 4 to 6 people, because I believe that it's easier to mobilize 4 to 6 people. These are also non-firefighters, so they won't get called away for fires. And these modules can be put together if needed, but there'll be 7-day-a-week coverage of these employees. So we can partner on a Saturday with the community chipping program. If Fire Safe Sonoma, that's an appropriate use of funding. We could do community work days. We can do other opportunities 7 days a week. And there'd be overlap days where if there's a big project, it could be 10 people at a time working. But most of the time, it's just going to be a module of 4 to 6 working on a project. And the reason we're trying to do that also is for the community outreach portion is there's one person that knows everything about that project, and all the property owners only talk to one person. There's no middle people. There's no third entity. So if there's a rosemary bush not to cut, there's a tree not to prune, there's a whatever to avoid, they tell one person, and that person's there every day to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's how we're going to organize it. But I also gave you some background too, that we don't want to, we want to make sure a private industry stays healthy as well.
So you're not just poaching Jason's employees?
Well, that's what's been happening, right? Is everyone's been getting employees. But this could be an opportunity for seasonal firefighters, and I'll just say it, firefighters are the worst at vegetation management, but laid off seasonal firefighters in the winter could come do this work. Regional park employees could come on their months off and come do this work. But ultimately, I'd like to see collaboration where we're all just working side by side. So I'm trying to work that out with Audubon Canyon Ranch, where we work side by side on all these projects too. So we're not competing for the same ground, and we're also becoming more efficient in how we operate. So that county roads, regional parks, state parks, all these groups that are out there doing this work, I think we can increase the efficiency as well. So, and everybody
Don't let
knows.
Don't let the firefighters do it. They'll definitely cut the rosemary bushes.
Well, I think that's a really valid point that you mentioned about the use of prescribed fire as a really economic tool that can help reduce fuel loads. You've always been an advocate of that. And I think our November discussion, having everybody report out what prescribed fires have happened was fantastic. It was really great to see the amount of collaboration. But our approach, I think, needs to be just taken to scale. We're working in relatively remote areas, mostly on private or public lands. We do have a few projects on private lands, but it's been largely on ecological fires, which are totally legit and have a huge part to play. But we need to think about how to get more concentrated around these communities so those fuel loads are reduced. And you've been a huge advocate of that. And I see great collaboration between Fire Forward, CAL FIRE, the various fire districts, and the county as much as possible, as much as we can. So I think that's a great approach to using a very effective tool.
Yeah,
we have about six.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Marshall.
Absolutely, and I'll even put it out there because I know there's not a lot of firefighters here. I know it's being recorded, but firefighters also might not be the best at prescribed burning. So it's going to take a shared approach that I think there's going to be a good workforce. The Fire Forward's an awesome model, prescribed burn associations, private property owners, land managers, where we can do a lot more. And it becomes more that the firefighters are just there during the greatest potential for an escape, more as a standby resources, but they're not there maybe doing a lot of the implementation, because what I'm seeing is just because of how, and I mainly work for government, we're trying to get burns done in whatever, 4 hours, 6 hours because of smoke, because of dinner time or whatever, rather than just being patient and let the fire back, slowly spread across the landscape. And so the more we can get into letting property owners or letting whomever just kind of watch and monitor and not have firefighters try to meet a deadline, I think we're going to increase the amount of acreage burned low intensity versus, oh, hurry up and get it done. That's not a good model. So that's what I'm hopeful as well, as we just gain more and more trust and interagency cooperation to do burning. And maybe burn piles are the gateway to get to prescribed burning, and not every prescribed burning is 100 acres or 1,000 acres. It might be a quarter acre, might be a half acre, whatever it looks like. We get people more used to it. So
that was my comment. That was my comment. Burn piles, burn piles, burn piles. More flexibility. Broadcast burns, I mean, we need them, but they're very challenging. But burn piles, properly done burn piles that actually create some biochar, like lots of opportunities there.
Broadcast out of a pile too.
That's right. Good. Let's go to Jason and then Kelly, and then I'd like to have each of the presenters give a final summary notes, if you would. Jason.
We just touched on Kim. I know this is an issue near and dear to yourself, and I think it's a really critical issue. We might want to save it for the next meeting and really take a deeper dive on it. But, working as a community here, workforce development is a real thing, right? And all my staff are Conservation Corps veterans. I come from the Conservation Corps myself. And after doing this work, a lot of times you get a bunch of skills and there's nowhere else to go once you're graduated from the program. So I think, looking at young people and really trying to give them some opportunity in this field is a really important factor in all of this. So just kind of wanted to, voice that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jason. Let's go to Kelly, and then Adriana, do you have a quick update?
Hi, the difference between the pile burning and the broadcast burning was something that we recently experienced in Sonoma County, that Marshall was kind enough and Kim was kind enough to help us get through as a private landowner of 300 plus acres. And as we're going through in environmental resource solutions, moving into the north side project that we're getting ready, that we just started, we're looking at, is it appropriate to lop and scatter everything and leave it there, or to start implementing some piles so that we can do pile burning effectively and not have so much fuel on the ground. So we're looking at how to implement that, and we'll be asking Marshall and Kim how we can better manage the fuels that we're creating as we're going through these fuel breaks. So I just
Okay.
want to share that with the group, that we're looking at more than just lop and scatter as foresters. We're looking at the whole picture and trying to do the right things.
That sounds
For the
good. Thank you, Kelly.
environment.
Adriana?
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to make another through line for our conversation. So we were hearing from our neighbors about their wildfire resilience programs that they have. Kim just shared that the county is just about to embark or is at the beginning of our own process. And we have a chance to engage the community in this planning process too. And so there's I've been tapped to help facilitate one of those conversations later. I think early this spring is when we'll have it, maybe in April. And members of this group will be invited to attend and participate, and we'll come up with a process that helps people, have enough information to provide good feedback and the kind of engagement that feels good as we step through this. So I just wanted to put that out there, and we'll come back to it later.
All right, thanks, Adriana. I appreciate the plug. And so maybe if I can get Ann, Joe, and Roberta to kind of wrap this up and give us what your greatest expectation or greatest hope for 2025 is in 3 words or less. No. But if you could just think, what would you like to say accomplish in this year as a way to kind of knock it home today?
Well,
Ann, you want to start?
Good Lord. That's a tough one. From in my world, improving the data, the modeling, the communication around this work. The misinformation out there is rampant and frustrating, as I know many of you know. There's also a sense of hopelessness out there. Like the problem is too big. I think LA contributed to that. Tubs and Nuns, of course, contributed to that as well. But dispelling that sense of hopelessness, like there's nothing we can do. I think that's part of our job in the next year. And for me, it's moving our all these different stakeholders together in a positive direction. Working with that many stakeholders is a challenge, and everybody's going to be a little bit disappointed together because nobody's going to get everything that they want. But at least we can all move in the same direction, and I, as the planning manager, can disappoint everybody equally as we move forward. So we've got a number of things to do this year, and one of the big ones, of course, is getting ourselves ready for the next ballot measure and proving a negative that no fire means we were successful. So that's a big challenge coming up. But and then I'll just end with, communication ends up, I've got technical background. I was a field biologist, and I've done a planner, environmental compliance stuff. Communication and building bridges ends up being the skill to have here. Over communicating and not assuming that some sort of understanding has happened. Communicate the same messages over and over and over, and hopefully someday we'll be all speaking the same language.
All right, thank you, Ann. I really appreciate that. Joe, do you want to wrap up?
3 words or less. I can't do that justice, but I mean, we're successful here. We have a really great team. I think success is always a little bit arbitrarily defined, but I think that collectively we, the counties, the folks on this call, can be, even more successful if we really drive teamwork. That's often hard to sort of develop the right kind of framework or harness to channel that, but to the extent that we can continue to refine that. I know there's an event tomorrow that I'm participating in. I think a number of folks on this call are probably participating in it. There's just a lot of work to do, and regionally, I think if we can better organize and try to work efficiently, there's a lot we can accomplish. We have one particular initiative. It's this enhanced resilience area initiative that we worked on with the unit and with the insurance companies. I think it has merit. It's got momentum. It's got the bones of a good strategy. It could be leveraged in other areas. And so I'm optimistic in 25 that we'll be able to make progress on that and then share kind of in meaningful ways with other counties what it looks like. And
Thank
thanks
you,
for including
Joe.
me. I got to jump to get to something else, but to the extent we meet again, thanks everybody. And I appreciate the
Joe.
opportunity to share some experience with you.
All right, thanks very much, Joe.
See you
And
tomorrow.
Roberta, if you could give us your perspective on 2025.
Yeah, anybody that knows me knows I can't do it in 3 words or less, but yeah, so this coming year, Fire Safe Sonoma, we're gonna be putting a lot, if not most of our effort, of course, into building our Measure H infrastructure to get that to work. In the meantime, we're likely gonna, once funds do become available, we'll also start working on some on the ground work that's already shovel ready for the most part. So that's coming up. So that's in the near term. But I want to leave you all with this. As we do this work, I think the most important, not one of, but the most important thing we should all be doing is educating the property owners on how to care for their land and be stewards of their land. Until we get people to do that, to learn how to care for their land well, we're going to be fighting this fight, you know, with bare knuckles forever and always. So we need to get the property owners to understand what they need to do and get them to do it, not us do it for them. I think that's the most important thing moving forward.
That's a great comment. I really appreciate that. And I really want to thank our panelists, Anne and Roberta and Marshall, and of course, Joe as well. You guys did a great job and handling a lot of information. So thanks for joining us, folks. We meet every third Thursday of the month. You'll get an invitation and a link to come join us. We also offer an in-person meeting if people want to take advantage of that. So thank you folks for joining us today and I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.